Academia sucks. There's no two ways about it. I am not sugarcoating anything in this video because I have realized for the past several years, academia is broken. It's dead, it's buried, in my opinion, based on these 5 things I'm going to be talking about in this video. And this will help you realize why academia needs to change, why so many people are leaving. You can see on the screen there's so many reports about people being unhappy. And I'm going to go through at different levels, from individual to the group, to the uni, to the country, and entirety in terms of academia, to give you a real life example as to why at every stage academia is broken and needs to be fixed. But first, what is academia? So really, academia is essentially the heart and soul of higher education. It's an area where researchers, students, scholars, professors all come together to advance our understanding of the world that we live in, pushing the boundaries of human knowledge, contributing to new advancements in society, and really asking massive questions. And naturally, part of that is research. As I mentioned in many videos across this YouTube channel and Instagram page, there are tons of questions and tons of understanding that academia is responsible for. A lot of advancements in society, from healthcare to technology to logistics and politics and laws and governance to art and design and humanities, you name it, research, in particular academia, has a focal point. So that sounds really interesting. That sounds really, okay, academia is of massive value and importance. Rightly so, but there's a problem. A massive problem that has been stemming there for decades, and it stems academia across every university in the entire world. And for those of you who might be new to academia or might be new to research, academia can be seen as a scam, it can be seen as a facade. Look on the screen right now, and I'll put these links in the video description down below. These are papers, actual research papers, where they've gone in and spoken to academics, PhD students, postdocs, academics, and they've found that life is not all rosy, unfortunately. So Aamir, you're saying that academia is all of this, it's got all of these things, it's really important, it's really integral to society. So how can it be that bad? I shall now tell you the 5 things in order of why academia is truly broken. So as I mentioned, there's kind of 5 levels to this explanation, discussion. Being a scientist trying to look at it methodically, we'll start with the individual. So why is academia broken from the individual sense? Now, you might have seen that there is a whole exodus of a lot of people leaving academia. Now, if you look at it from the individual point of view, let's break it down in terms of career, finances, and other things. From a career perspective, it's really hard to break into academia and also then progress in terms of, from getting a postdoc to landing a permanent position as a lecturer, or trying to find a permanent position in a research institute, which is even hard. Okay, let's look at that and say that's like with any role. Add the financial implications. Compared to other people of similar experience, your career and your financial ceiling is a lot lower, and for you to progress takes ages. So a professor in the UK, probably you're looking around about 80 to 90k after about 15 years of blood, sweat and tears. Whereas somebody who's in industry, even within the same country, could be looking at 150 to 200k in some places. Again, I'll put real life genuine stats on the screen to compare academia versus industry in this particular remit. But then you're already against the back foot now. Career kind of progression wise, not amazing. In terms of finances, barely anything compared to industry and other areas, especially if you're in that role for the same amount of time. But here's the punchline for an individual. It's this publish or perish mindset that you might have heard across social media, across people's discussions. And for those who might not know, it's just a notion of if you don't publish, you perish, meaning you can't progress, you're not looked at, you're passed on promotions, you're passed on contracts, you might get let go because you're not producing this cycle of genuine publications, research papers every year or every 6 months. And that causes a lot of pressure because sometimes those papers are outside of your control. You might not have the funding to do the research, you might not have the time, you might have other things come up, there might be issues in the lab or contaminations or problems that negate you or hinder your ability to publish. And sometimes you have to publish multiple papers every couple of months. And that is quite hard to do. And if you don't, the amount of stress that gathers from you doing that, if you don't, bye, see you, they'll grab somebody else. So the stress of publishing, the stress of being relevant, not getting much in terms of career progression. Yes, I'm trying to be objective here, you get a good job security. You don't see many lecturers getting fired. But then the ceiling, financial ceiling of you not actually getting much. On top of, and here's the last bit for the individual sense, it does sound flexible, like being in a permanent position, but it is flexible because you have to work that kind of Monday to Sunday. Lecturing is not a 9 to 5 job. I spoke to a colleague of mine who I was co-supervising for a PhD student, and she said If I was to total the hours I have as a lecturer who does do research and teach, it would be that kind of minimum wage. So the work to reward ratio is not there. And this is just the first step. We've got 4 more to go. Now let's look at it from a group point of view, from a research group point of view. If you're in a research group and you've got the supervisor, joke intended. There are some who are amazing, but there are some supervisors and PIs who unfortunately are quite ruthless. And if you look at it from the group point of view, if you don't gather funding and you don't produce those research papers or those innovative findings, you will get passed up in terms of extra funding, extra collaborations. You will have group politics. You have so much competition perhaps because a lot of you potentially PhD students are perhaps competing with each other. And there are elements and there are research areas and research fields where it is collaborative. But for a lot of the bioscience areas and the STEM areas, it can be quite competitive in the wrong sense and toxic in the wrong sense. And then within that group sense, you are then pressured by your superiors to get stuff out. When we talk about from an individual sense, is this you in terms of being able to be a researcher, put yourself into a group, and then you are dictated left, right, and centre. You are expected to work on the weekends. You are expected to be there. You're expected to do things in all sorts of mannerisms from 25 to 7. And that's just supposed to be the minimum level of service for you as a researcher and as a postdoc. When I was in my research area from a PhD point of view, from a postdoc point of view, there were so many research group problems between supervisors. There were, issues within whose name goes first and who didn't get that funding or whose problem it is. And then that is stressful. And the reason why I mention this group sense as a problem, there can be a lot of stress and a lot of headache about working in a big group because sometimes you might not get looked after. However, trying to be as objective as I can, there are elements when people have amazing groups, amazing research groups, where they go on trips together, they look after each other, but this is not always the case. So a friend of mine who worked in a very prestigious institute, a very research-governed institute in kind of the vascular area, was in quite a big research group. He mentioned that the PI would only see the PhD student twice in their entire PhD because they don't care. They see PhD students as data collectors. And this is what I mean by the group setting. You're not kind of managed or looked after or mentored. You're there as a data collector. If you don't do your work, fine, we'll go get somebody else. And you see this in very cutthroat research institutes where if you don't cut the mustard, it's fine, we'll go get somebody else. That's not an entirely pleasant place to be in. And that toxic academia culture stems from that group setting, unfortunately. Now this is from academia is broken from a university level or a university sense. This also applies to research institutes. And the reason why I don't like the way it is right now, why I feel it's broken, is you can have the most amazing research concepts, but if your university is down the pecking order in kind of rankings, most research councils won't even look at you. And again, giving you a real life example here, a friend of mine who was working in the same university that I was, moved to a different university, got a lower paid job in terms of, she was a senior lecturer at one and she became a lecturer, so one kind of stepped down in another place, purely because that place had more chance of winning grant funding so she could sustain her research. The place she was in, it was a non-research intensive university. Even though she was getting paid more, she knew that whatever research proposals she sent would never get looked at, no matter how good they were, because the university itself didn't have much weight. And to add to this, and if you think I'm lying or something like that, I remember a friend of mine told me this, that research councils, they look at where the university is or where the research may take place, and if you see that it's not of value, they'll put it away. Which is why you see a lot of research happens at the biggest, most well-funded, most prestigious institutes, because those are where they attract the most funding. Because you have to look at it from the grant council or the research council point of view. They want to look at what is the most ROI positive for them, what is the most return on investment they can get if they give this place funding. Are they going to get really good research out? Are they going to get a lot of papers out? Yes. There's higher risk if it's at a non-research intensive university. So that's not a great place to be in, because you might be a very accomplished scientist. You might be got some really innovative ideas, really useful ideas that maybe other people haven't thought of, but you'll be passed up because of where you are. Nothing to do with you, nothing to do with your pedigree, nothing to do with your publication, etc. But where you are can dictate a large part of whether you're entitled for funding or not. And that's silly. Now moving on to the country level. And you probably think, okay, what are the differences between the UK and the US and Canada and European countries and Middle East and Asia and Australia, New Zealand, all sorts? What's the difference? There is a massive difference, just plain and simply from article processing charges of publishing a paper. I remember a friend of mine said, if you publish from this particular country, the rules and regulations of that country and the research that can get done there allows them to publish for free because there are certain grants that allow you to do so. But if you publish from this country, they don't have that same infrastructure, or they don't have the same rules, or they don't value research perhaps as much, so you have to pay X amount, like £3,000-4,000, because of their procedures and processes. Other people, they want to do research, but they are denied a visa because they can't work in that certain country. Or somebody wants to import and export certain samples for their research, but they can't because of logistical issues within that country, or the issues between the two countries, or something like that. So, geopolitical, whatever these names are called, in terms of issues with many countries around the world, or problems with each other, or just hindrances, can affect research massively. And then you add in the cost of living in certain countries, where you might be a phenomenal researcher, but you actually can't afford to live there. You can't afford because, let's say, you're in London or Denmark or something where the cost of living is really expensive. How are you supposed to survive when the funding that you're getting, or the salary that you're getting for being a postdoc, barely makes ends meet? But if you were to do it in a different country, you got enough. So then where you are also makes a problem, or also causes a problem. It's like, you can't win from an individual sense, from a group sense, uni sense, from a country sense. What about like entirety? What about the whole concept of academia? And here it gets really. So to hit home this massive global problem with academia, we have to talk about something known as unfair advantages. So there's actually a book that I read, and I actually got to meet the authors who become really good friends. Unfair Advantages by Ash Ali and Hassan Kuba. And essentially the concept is that we all have unfair advantages that we can lean on and use to really accelerate our careers. And it's not a bad thing, it should be something we should look into. And there's unfair advantages like money, intelligence, location, education, kind of expertise and status. Something the book refers to as the Miles Framework, MILES. Now, if you were to look at it from academia, in terms of breaking through to academia, you need a lot of money in order to fund the research for you to really push ahead compared to other people. You need to be in a good location because where you do your PhD really dictates how your research trajectory goes. Something I mentioned in previous videos as well. It's not about what you do in your PhD, it's where you do it. Status, the status of the university, as I just mentioned in terms of the university problem, makes a massive difference in terms of the funding that you need. You need, yes, intelligence is natural. We all should, strive to be as smart as we can to get the best research we can in order to publish the best research to society in terms to advance that particular area. So those are just some of the unfair advantages you need at the very least just to make a PhD worthwhile and just to kind of break through academia. For however many academics you see, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of really, really accomplished scientists who had to leave. And that used to be the paradigm before, that they had to leave. Now a lot of people are leaving by choice because of all of those problems I mentioned earlier. Now, as I mentioned, I want to put links to various articles that I found that made me realize that I need to share this on YouTube, because a lot of people need to be aware that academia is not as glamorous as people think. However, with all that doom and gloom, what are the resolutions? How can we actually change academic culture? This video is already massively long, so I'm going to talk about a few things because this concept could be its own video, its own series down below. And if you think that's a good idea, let me know down in the comment section below. And if you want to subscribe to potentially see that in more detail, you can do right now. But let's talk about some of the resolutions, some of the concepts. Number one, more respect. A lot of people are leaving academia because they're not respected, they're not valued, they're not treated right. I wasn't in many areas, and many other people that I know through Instagram who become good friends, they also attest the same, where they're just treated like robots or just treated like garbage. That I don't care if you've got stuff to do outside. I need this done now. We need to publish that, or we need to send it off. I need this done now. I don't care where you are. Go back, travel 3-4 hours back home. I remember somebody told me on Instagram that they were traveling towards a conference, and their PI told them they need to travel back 4 hours to finish this at night so they can publish it tomorrow. Respect. So one of the biggest things I think across the board, no matter what research area you're in, is respect. Number two, I think there are some, glimpses, especially in the sports science world, of more collaboration over competition because they need each other for participants. I wish that kind of mindset was seen more in a lot of the other areas of research, but a lot of it is very hidden. It's not kind of communal or collaborative. A lot of it is very secret and cutthroat, which is not ideal. That really makes academia a lot worse. Where if you can build trust, or you can build concepts where you can join forces together and you can make massive impacts. But because of status and ego, people want to be the one who found this or the first name on the paper. You become more of a competitive mindset than a collaborative one. So that's something else that needs to change. More collaboration, less competition. Yes, it's good, healthy competition, naturally, but it's too much of a toxic one in academia. The other one, which is I think very personal to me because I wish it was more so, is recognizing other aspects of research as really credible and important elements, not just how much you published. For example, the impact you made in that area. There's other skills that are really important as a researcher that you have control over, because sometimes papers are not something you control. There could be an epic research group where you did barely anything, but you get first name on the paper, whereas somebody else did everything, but they got their name on the third because of issues, but they were much more accomplished scientists than that person. But on a screen, first author, cool, yeah, let's just grab him or grab her, fair enough. This is a problem. There are other elements of research that are huge in terms of scientific outreach, scientific communication, leadership skills, collaborative efforts, and there's elements of genuine significance that should be warranted when you're going to a CV or an interview that don't get looked. They don't even care. It's just how much papers have you published. And I think that's a flawed concept, as I mentioned in other videos as well, because it was very helpful for me. It has many other things that I felt should be warranted, and many other people like me, but because of my issues with the lab or lack of funding, I couldn't get as many papers out. And these are not excuses, these are things that actually happened. But you would get passed up like no business because you don't have papers that are published. That needs to change. And that brings on to kind of the fourth aspect a bit, which is this publish or perish mindset. That needs to go, that needs to change. There has to be an importance for publications, but it shouldn't be the only one. It shouldn't be all or end all type scenario that it already is. So guys, I think I've talked for quite a long time. If you stayed here towards the end, do drop a thumbs up in the comments just so I know that somebody potentially stayed for 26 minutes, probably 22 minutes when I cut it down. I really appreciate it. I know I had a lot to talk about in this video, but I hope you find it of value. If you want to support the channel and me, if there's anything else you want me to look into or share or discuss, more than happy to do so. Just let me know in the comment section down below. You can find me on Instagram as well. I do a lot of kind of day-to-day life, and I'm a bit more reachable on there. Aamir at ResearchTribe.org if you want to email me. But you can tell I'm really passionate about this topic. So if you want to know why I actually left academia, I made a dedicated video you can see over here. And if you want to look at some of the lessons I learned from academia whilst I was there, that is over here. So without further ado, I'll let you crack on. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.